Hey, this is Wookie and Lear from Mandala Studios. Welcome to the workshop. Welcome to part one of our Maker Latex Goat Mask sculpting.
I'm going to start with blocking out the sculpt. So I'm drawing some lines on the head here. They're showing the rough extent to which the mask will go. They're sort of roughly covering the area we're thinking that we will build up. Then we start adding some blocks of clay. They're just to add thickness initially, but also you can see I'm adding on the brow there, I'm adding on some cheekbones, and I'm beginning to put the shape of the nose in.
But at this point it's just very, very loose. It's all about getting thickness of clay to build up the whole thing we're making rather than any shape of what we're making.
Yeah, it's getting the underlying structure that's deep under there just to try and make it look vaguely like what it is we're aiming for. Ideally more specifically like that.
So we're using WED clay, which is a water-based clay with something like glycerin. So now we're moving on to the general forms, which is the next step along, where we actually start to make it look like what we're aiming it to look like.
So the two ears there are just a couple of shapes in flat clay which have been pinched to form the shape. I think I actually drew the initial flat clay shape out, and so both of them were the same size to start with.
And then it's just a case of layering bits on and starting to play with the overall look of what we're going for. We've got a brief for this that's designed to match a soft toy, so it's very loose. We've just got to try and create a friendly looking creature.
And so I'm working on the symmetry there, trying to keep both sides of it looking vaguely symmetrical. And you can see right at the last minute we've had a pair of horns that we're going to use for this, which we already had in the workshop, so we haven't shown you making those, which we pinned on. This is to make sure that A, we're balancing the sculpt to include the horns, because they're obviously quite big, so we'll need that, and B, we have a rough idea what we're working for. Now, because of the size of the horns, it means we had to build up the back of the mask a bit more to accommodate them, to fit them in, and that's what I'm doing now.
So in general, this stage is just refining all those forms and starting to position the relative details of what we want. So we'll start to lay in the final shapes of the ears, the nose, the brows, and just try and create the overall look.
You see that ear there was too far forward, so I've moved it backwards, added a bit more clay in to fill the gap, and I'm smoothing it down so the back of it is equally neat. And again, we're still building up the beds for those horns. And we're just working on the general shape of things. It takes me a long time to sort out the ears here, and I think in the end Wookie will have to step in and to be another pair of eyes. So you see we had another slab of clay go on there, and for the horns to sit on. And we're adding a base for the horns. If we tried to glue them to the flat of them, A, they'd look pretty weird, and B, they wouldn't be particularly well stuck mechanically.
No, so they need to fixing of clay around them, so that when the mould is made, the final piece will grab those horns, and it will give the glue something to fix those horns into, and it'll hide any gaps where the base doesn't quite perfectly fit the surface of the shape.
Provides it with a socket. I did some fiddling with the eyes there. It's one that I keep finding with I forget the inner corner of eyes and the outer corner of eyes, and they need a lot of neatening up.
So you can see we're starting to get quite a lot further with the sort of shapes and details in this. This is an interesting sculpt because there's very little in the way of hard line work detailing. It's all refined soft curves.
Yeah.
So you can see there we've raked over the entire surface, and we'll keep doing that with increasingly fine rakes to try and smooth all those surfaces off.
Yeah. I think at this point you can see that the ears aren't quite right still. The one on the right is not sitting in the same place as the one on the left.
But we've started now to add some detail into the nose structure, trying to get some interest there, because it was looking a bit plain even for the brief we were going for.
Yep.
We could tell something wasn't quite looking right, but that wasn't it, so we took it straight back off again.
Yeah. And there we go, this is a better look, and I've said since we've got that massive expansive forehead, but also these really big horns, we needed to add in some more structure to support the horns, and to add some shape to the forehead so it wasn't just a dome. I mean, foreheads actually have quite a lot of shape in them anyway. And and this mirrors the shape that you would naturally get in a forehead.
Especially with the bone structures to support all those
The weight
of
of
horns
them,
and the impact
yeah.
the horns might take in an actual goat.
Yeah,
So we just put extra clay on, then refined that back into the whole surface.
and it gives it a much more interesting shape to it, I think.
Yeah, you can really see it in the brow line as well.
Yeah, it makes everything tie together much more naturally.
So what Leah's doing now, she's just raking over the whole thing with a wire brush, plastic wire brush,
Yep.
just to try and final smooth out all the shapes. And
Yep.
at this point, we realised the sockets weren't deep enough still, so they needed.
We'd lost the texture because I'd added that extra block of clay on. We'd lost the structure of them, and you visually do need that as well. And going over the back, make sure the back of your sculpt look nice. It's easy to miss the bits from angles. You don't look at it quite often with our with the orc ones. We have to lie them on the back so we can look at the chin. This one we don't have that problem, but we do need to check behind the ears is okay. That's more smoothing down, more building up.
So you can see their head on that the ears aren't quite at the same level.
Yeah.
So we cut it off and put it up back
We
on
moved it a
in
bit higher.
different place.
And then I got Wookiees to come in and sort of measure things a bit better with the calipers.
Yeah, it's just taking reference points from the sculpture itself so that everything seems as close to symmetrical as it needs to be to look like a real creature. Because most creatures we're sculpting are going to be bilaterally symmetrical. So we want them to look as even as we can without getting too panicky over it at this stage.
We quite often end up with two of us working on the same sculpt. We find it's a lot easier for getting a fresh pair of eyes in, especially when there's someone just there who can come over and go, it's this. And you'll often find on these videos that you've got someone pointing at something, you know. One of us will walk in and just point at all the things that need changing and then walk off again.
So we've added some talc which helps prepare everything for texture. So first of all I pull out the horns and neaten up the inside of those sockets. And then I'm going to sort of brush talc over the entire surface. This reduces the drag of the tools I'm using. It also dries out the surface a little bit, allows me to get a bit further. Then I'm going to brush over the whole sculpture with the same plastic wire brush Leah was using earlier, but this time I'm paying attention to the directionality of the fur lines that I'm putting into it. You'd get a reference off a picture of an actual animal that you're using for this. If you note, it's starting to bead up with little beads of clay as I'm doing this. So again, in a little while, I'll probably brush over that with talc again, and that'll brush all those beads off.
Just cleaning up the inside of the eyes again, because that's one that always ends up again with little details and looking a bit messy, so it needs revisiting at regular intervals.
So now I'm going over the surface with some wires in a handle. They're sort of sprung steel, different lengths, thicknesses. This gives me some harder lines for the fur directionality. You see it's heavily building up some beading of the surface now, but as I brush over it with the talc, that all just falls off.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff.